All right, here we go. Episode 1, Dan Mathews and the Animals. He's the animal. I'm Dan Mathews. Appreciate you all tuning in for our very first episode. And of course, if you follow the Philly Godfather, the Animals, the college kids, everybody of the sort, you know who this man is that I'm talking with on this show today. He is Matt Maltepes, and he is going to hop on and talk some games with us. Matt, it is great to finally catch up with you, buddy. I know that we had thought about doing the week 0, but after watching week 0, I think we probably did our listeners in the audience a favor
Dave.
of just saying, let's punt. Let's just wait for next weekend. And even week 1, eh,
We'll see. We'll see what's going on with the couple games we have coming up.
for sure, as we will be getting into all of them. Just to let you know what we are going to talk about on this show today. Obviously, with this being a Tuesday release of the show, we want to really dive in deep into the early week action that is going to be happening around college football. That, of course, is the game happening in Salt Lake City between the Florida Gators and the Utah Utes. We'll get into that. Friday night, you're going to get Louisville and Georgia Tech as well. And sandwiched in between is going to be Matt Rule's debut with the Nebraska Cornhuskers on the road, taking on PJ Fleck's Minnesota Golden Gophers. So we will do all of that. And then also, too, at the end, you're probably saying, Dan, Matt, what about the futures? Well, I'm glad you asked, Mr. or Mrs. Audience member, because we are going to throw out some futures at you as well. So, Matt, no time like the present. Let's get right to it as we have one of the games happening this weekend. I mentioned it last, but we got to start with it first because there's so many different storylines that go into this Big Ten matchup on Thursday night in Minneapolis. And that is number one, as I mentioned, it's Matt Rule's debut as the head coach at Nebraska. A lot of high hopes for him for what he did at Temple in your backyard right there in the Philly area, but also, too, what he did down at Baylor, taking over for a program that he himself pretty much had to rebuild in the aftermath of the Art Briles scandals that riddled that program. So now he is at Nebraska, a once proud program, a program that used to get guys from all over the country to come play for Tom Osborne and the Cornhuskers. Needless to say, pretty much since the Frank Solich era, that has not been the case there at Nebraska. So let's just go ahead and give you what this game looks like on Thursday night. Minnesota being with a proven and a continuing head coach in PJ Fleck, probably a program that's a little further ahead than Nebraska right now. Nebraska, much like many other programs that have a new head coach, hitting the transfer portal hard. And we will talk about some of those transfer portal additions here in a second, but just kind of an overarching view of this game, Matt. You've got the Gophers a 7.5 point favorite. The next game's a 6.5. We'll get to that in a second. 7.5 point favorite, at least the early line for this one. And the over-under is at 43 and a hook. What's your read on this one?
So start off with the rotation number for all sports bettors out there on your screen. Sports betting screens, it's 145, 146. Minnesota opened to 7.5 in May around the dip down to as low as 6, but we saw sharp bettors bet this line above, drove it up back up to the key number of 7. Total opened at 47. We saw sharp bettors immediately step in and bring this total down to 44, 43.5. And there's actually some 42.5 depending on where you shop. There's a couple of them floating around. Nebraska, as we know, they're coming off 6 consecutive losing seasons. Good news is that they have Matt Rule now leading the charge, right? So that's definitely going to help. Rule has experience of turning around programs. So you have a smile if you're a fan, for the future. But as of right now, it's still a transition year. I mean, we look on offense. Rule has said that Nebraska will be huddling up more, and their usage of the fullback position is going to rise more this year. To me, it comes as no surprise because he also stated that he's looking to take more play action shots down the field. So he's going to use the fullback, running backs, all that to set it up. Rule likes his QB and Sims. He likes the fact that he can move a bit, and he has a lot of talent in terms of picking up third downs on his feet. But the problem with the kid is his accuracy. The O-line here is solid at run blocking, but the problem is the pass protection. It was ranked 129 in pass blocking last year, which is not good at all. The running back room has a lot of experience, which also helps. Same goes with the wide receivers. Defense we have here, they have a new defensive coordinator from Syracuse. I believe it's a solid hire, but the team is still learning a new scheme, which is going to take time to get used to and everything. Nebraska's defense lost 3 of their better players on the defense side of the ball. Defensive lineman from last year, Mathis, drafted in the, I believe, 6th round, if I'm not mistaken. and they lost Garrett Nelson, outside linebacker, another linebacker in Houseman. But their linebacker depth is still solid despite all of that. All 4 players in the secondary are returning. But like I said, it's still a transition year for this Nebraska team. Minnesota, we can go to Minnesota. Everybody knows Minnesota's way of football is ground and pound, and they don't pass the ball often, but they should be a little more versatile this year, especially than years prior. They have a pair of OCs running the show this year with a new QB, a Greek kid named, they nicknamed him the Greek Rifle. He has a stronger arm than, what's his name, Tanner Morgan, QB from last year. He also ended up with 5 starts last year, which should give him a jump start for this year, a little, gameplay experience. One of their biggest losses to me was their leading rusher, Mo Abraham. But one of their biggest losses to me also was their center from last year, who was drafted in the 2nd round. They did bring in some capable running backs, so I'm not too worried about their running back group. Wide receiver group, upgrade in my opinion. 2 transfer coming in, have potential. My belief is the offense is going to be similar to last year, just a little more versatile. Defense for Minnesota, I mean, they had back-to-back top 10 defenses. They're a good defense. They have a slow pace, which also the offense had a slow pace, which helped the defense years prior. We'll see their struggles a little bit are on the pass rush end, even though they're a top 10 defense. So it's actually quite amazing because their defense was ranked top 10 defense despite being outside in top 100 in defensive line havoc rate and passing down sack rate, which is surprising because usually that's what makes a top 10 defense. So yeah, that's a little bit cause of concern to me in terms of maybe a regression. I have a bit of a downgrade this year on the defense, but still solid defense. Verdict for me is we have a slow pace in Minnesota, new QBs for both teams, a new QB in Nebraska that's going to have a bit more focus on the ground game and the use of fullback, more huddling up for the offense. Nebraska, slow pace. That means, and pass protection concern for Nebraska's, along with accuracy issues for Sims, spells out all the information I'm going through now. It spells out the under for me, and I took under 44. We're on the key number 7 for Minnesota. That's the only way I would play it. If it goes to 7.5, I would not play it, but I did bet under 44 in this game.
Yeah, interesting enough. I mean, for everything you just said right there, it does probably scream the under in this one. And a couple of different things for Nebraska fans. One, to really give you a little bit of encouragement, but maybe the other, not so much. Just before we went on, it was reported that Arik Gilbert, who, of course, once at LSU and then went to Georgia, now ending up in Nebraska. I can't remember if he was made eligible after his transfer, but arrested for burglary there in the Lincoln area. So would have to believe no matter what, his status for this game is going to be a no-go. For Jeff Sims, though, I think there is a little bit of a wild card with him because he was a guy, Matt, that as I watched him the last couple of years at Georgia Tech, everything that you just talked about, he had all those issues under Jeff Collins and the coaching staff there on the flats in Atlanta, where he had a patchwork offensive line. He had 2 different offensive coordinators in Dave Patenaude, and then with Chip Long coming on and being the OC there. It just never was really a good fit for him there at Georgia Tech. So now he goes on to Nebraska. A new day with a coach that has a proven track record in Matt Rule, and also to a coach that can allow for success for players as well in his offensive scheme. It will be interesting to see. I mean, if he has that one game, I mean, the one that I would point to with Nebraska, Matt, is the one that he had in the COVID year, 2020, his very first start against Florida State, where he willed that Georgia Tech team to a win there in Tallahassee. Now for this one, though, first game out of the gate, I'm with you. I think that this screams a lot of the debut of, remember, Jim Harbaugh when he took over at Michigan. I believe, if I'm trying to remember, did they open against Utah that year? I think they might have. But I just remembered it was a look at that Michigan team and you say, yeah, this is going to be a little bit of a transition year there in Ann Arbor. And then, we've seen what Michigan looks like right now, but I'm sure we'll talk about the Wolverines as the season goes along. But I'm with you, though. I really like that under. Again, like I said, the OU number is at 43 and a hook, at least at last I checked. We'll see what the Sharps have done with that number here in the meantime. Let's move it along to Florida at Utah. Now, this is a game that could be kind of like a game we're going to talk about in Thursday's episode with LSU and Florida State. For Utah, they could be playing the part of LSU, of trying to get a revenge win from last year's loss, where, of course, the Utes went on the road, went into the swamp. Very first game for Billy Napier. He was able to help that Florida team win that game and be able to at least give them, in the long run, a salvage for their season. The other part of it as well with Utah in this game is going to be, what is the status of Cam Rising? Because it does seem like Kyle Whittingham is being pretty cryptic right now with what his quarterback status could be. Last two Rose Bowls, knee injuries in those Rose Bowls, and that has been something that has kind of, really started to slow down his recovery time in trying to come back from those injuries. But if there's one thing we know about Rising, he is tough as the day is long, and he is going to be able to mix it up in the run game, but also, too, in terms of the passing game as well. Utes are a 6.5-point favorites in this one. I mean, at least, the early look at that, Matt, I feel like that's 6.5. Doesn't that kind of seem like it's a little bit low in terms of the team that Utah has, as opposed to the team that Billy Napier is bringing across the country?
So the line did open -9.5. Currently sits at 6.5 most shops. You might have a couple sevens flown out there. Total open 50.5 some spots, and you're probably able to catch total now of 45.5, 46, depending on where you shop. So it did move quite a lot. Florida back-to-back losing seasons, right? 1 of 5 versus AP top 25 teams last year. They have a new QB at the helm. Anthony Richardson is gone. Huge loss, in my opinion. So definitely a big loss. QB consistency issues and whatnot. Running back group, strongest group on the team probably. Wide receivers, a little underwhelming. Biggest question mark to me is the offensive line. They lost their top offensive lineman. They only have 1 returning starter and 4 transfers. So now you might have some, little issues, consistency issues, chemistry and whatnot. Defense. So they're outside of the top 100 in returning production, but the defense wasn't good at all last year. So maybe that's a good thing, Austin Armstrong, 3rd defensive coordinator the last 3 seasons, but I do like him. I think he actually helps out the struggling defense. D-line should improve, but they do have some causes for concern. Their inside guys on the line have talent, but one of the guys inside named Cam, he went from 340 pounds to 370, so he added 330 pounds. Caleb Banks, he only played 47 snaps in total of last 2 years. Watson, extremely big. He came in weighing 415, 440. He was supposed to come in camp and bring that down to 380. But then when we looked at the numbers, there was some issues with his weight as well. So some little concern there in terms of their ability to penetrate. Linebacker group has more depth, but still question mark. They need some players to break out this season for them. They have a good cornerback, Jason Marshall Jr., pretty damn good. He's going to be playing a little more man-on-man press coverage this year. So the idea behind that is better pressure and better scheme will make him take another step. But it depends if that defensive line is not they didn't get out of shape too much and they're able to actually create that penetration, which can help them. Utah. Let's go to Utah. Utah had their win total set at 8.5 this year. They had an upgraded recruiting class, finished AP top 10 for the first time since 2008 last year. They have a great team at home, 6-0 at home last year, but they have a target on their back this year. QB Cam Rising, like we talked about, recently put on the depth chart as a starter for the season. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to start week 1. Utah's coach, he essentially said he's going to be a game time decision. We'll see by game time if he's going to go or not. It's a big question mark. Last questions for Rising is when he does play, coming back from that knee surgery, if he does suit up, will he be the same Cam Rising? Is he going to have that seam mobility, the ability to extend the play with his legs? So we'll see with that. Wide receivers, to me, for Utah are not the best group this year, but they do have 3 returning starters on the O-line. And from everything I've seen, they have a great depth on that O-line, even though they lost 2 O-linemen last year. Their center from last year is gone, and the other one was, I think, drafted in the 4th round, if I'm not mistaken. Defense is what carried this team over the years, right? Last year, they're mean. They were the best in points per game in the Pac-12. In the yards per play metric, they're the best in the Pac-12 as well, and they should be the best, I think, again, in the Pac-12. They just had their highest graded recruiting class, as I said previously. Their defensive line is as deep as it has ever been. 7 of 8 returning players on the D-line. So they definitely have that defensive line returning. Linebackers pretty damn good, even if they may not be as good as last year. Defensive backs pretty good. More question marks in the back end, and I believe in the secondary than on the D front. But that's a testament to how good they are on the D front. To me, when I looked at the team, Looked at the game all in all. We have a star-studded defense in Utah, a bit of a downgrade at QB for Florida after losing Anthony Richardson. Huge question mark in Florida's O-line. Downgrade a QB for Utah if Cam Rising doesn't suit up right. And even if he does, is he the same Cam Rising? So still, I think, takes some time getting used to things. So there's still a little bit of a downgrade there. His ability to move and rust. Florida had what I would call a reset on defense. I think it's an improvement, to be honest, because of how bad it was. So to me, I look at all this and it pointed me to the under 23 first half. I think they come out slow, a little bit more so. And other than that, to me, it's tough to touch the game with so many question marks, especially side. Cam Rising doesn't play. He does play. So I went under 23 first half here.
Yeah, I mean the whole over under for this game is 46 and a hook, and I mean for everything you just said right there. I mean I think like also too looking at the Florida side of things, you've got Graham Mertz, the Wisconsin transfer, now going to be the quarterback. At least Matt, from people I talk with at Florida, they say he is a guy that's not going to lose you games. But he's also a guy that's not going to win you games. Like there's not going to be a game where we look at and say, wow, Graham Mertz really willed this team through. His top target probably going to be Ricky Pearsall, the Arizona State transfer, who came in and had a pretty good 2022 season for the Gators. And then another name to keep an eye on as well. Their run game should be pretty solid. Now, I understand they do have some question marks there on the offensive line. But again, I mean, it's one of those things. Week one, you don't know necessarily how the offense is going to fire, at least in the early going. It's going to be interesting to see what they look like defensively. Austin Armstrong was a crucial hire for them this offseason, where it was a hire that initially, went to Alabama. And then when Billy Napier came calling and he looked at the situation at Florida saying, well, this is going to be my shop. Okay, I will go take that job. And that's why now you see that there is Kevin Steele in Tuscaloosa and not Austin Armstrong. So going to be interesting to see what they look like defensively. I think a lot of Florida fans look at this team this year too, Matt, as whatever happens positively is a bonus, because of how well Billy Napier has recruited so far in this 2024 cycle, that they at least believe. And I hear people wondering, oh, is he on the hot seat? Get out of here. I mean, he is recruiting better than they have in some time there in Gainesville. I mean, I even had somebody tell me he's doing what Urban did when he was here. And they haven't had that in some time there, where that brand has been able to go into those high schools in a very talent-rich state and been able to get kids to say yes to Florida. Because really, I think the reason, and this is kind of an overarching too with the Sunshine State, hey, why is Florida? Why is Florida State? Why are Miami down? That's because Kirby Smart started going into some of the South Florida high schools. That's because Nick Saban started to do that. It's because Dabo Swinney started to do that. So you started to see a little bit of rating of the state. And now I think that really you're starting to see a stronger recruiting effort from not only Napier, but also to Mario Cristobal at Miami, and also to as well with Mike Norvell there at Florida State. So with this one, again, the Utes are giving 6.5 in this one, 46 in a hook. For the game itself, you like the first half under at 23. So that is the Thursday night game. All right, to wrap up the games portion of today's show, again, episode 1 of Dan Mathews and the Animals. We will go to Louisville at Georgia. It is, I guess, conceivably at Georgia Tech, because it is a neutral site game just right around the corner from Tech's campus there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the home of the Falcons. As this is a Louisville team that comes into this one, Matt, with a new head coach in Jeff Brom, of course, having success there at Purdue. He is a Louisville guy. He brings his brother Brian Brom, who also played quarterback for Louisville. And he also, too, brings an offense along with him that has a strong running back in Jawar Jordan, who really showed out in the Fenway Bowl last season. And also, too, has probably a much more talented roster than this Georgia Tech team. I'll get your side of it before I get into the Tech side after you go through.
So yeah, game opened Louisville minus 7.5. Currently sits at 7, 7.5, 8, depending where you shop. Mostly 7.5 to 8. Total open around 51. Currently sits at 49 across most shops. Could find maybe a 48. So Louisville's offense, you talked about Brom, right? New coach. And then he brought his brother, Brian Brom, to be the OC. So big upgrade, in my opinion, for the coaching staff. They were able to snag lots of talent in the transfer portal. They're able to. This is probably, in my opinion, probably the best Louisville team since the Lamar Jackson days. Most sharp bettors agreed with me because this win total went from 7, it jumped all the way from 7 to 8.5. Offense to me is going to have more deep shots this year, explosive plays, and they're going to stretch the field and make a much more versatile running back room, like you talked about. Very great balance. Offensive line is going to be better than most people expect. I think, in my opinion, I believe nobody's really talking about them too much, talking about all these other things. The O-line to me is strong, and people slid them under the rug. I think they're going to show out this year. Louisville's defense, we all know they were menacing last year and came in number 1 in the nation in sacks, and they're able to force plenty of turnovers. But the defense, they a bit of more question mark this year than last year. I mean, they did lose a lot of players, but they did a great job at filling those holes. Like I told you, they had a great transfer portal. They might not create as much havoc as last year being number 1 in the nation, but I think they're still in pretty good shape. When we look at Georgia Tech, well, this Georgia Tech team, I think the last couple of years have been pretty hard for fans and hard to forget, and not for a good reason, for a bad reason, how bad they've been. They had another rough start last year, but I think there was light at the end of the tunnel, right? You had Brent Key come in, and he ended the season on a 4-4 run. And those 4 wins are more than any Georgia Tech team had in the last couple seasons since, I think, 2018, if I'm not mistaken. They had wins to end the season against UNC, Pitt, and a strong Duke team. And so I think Georgia Tech fans have a little bit of something to smile, like I said previously, smile about going in the future. Transfer portal should help the team, along with the fact that Key has a now full offseason to prepare. They also have a new QB at the helm, big-time recruit from Texas A&M, and now starter Haynes King. Wide receiver group, much more explosive. Deep threats such as Blaylock from Georgia, Leary coming from Alabama. O-line, of course, is a huge problem, and it's been a huge problem for over a couple of years now. I don't think this year is any different. The only plus side they have this year is they have some experience. That's the only plus. They have 4 returning starters. This defense was far from good last year. Horrendous against the run. Should have an improvement in the secondary, but it might not even look like it because of how bad that defensive front is. So that's a little bit of a question mark as well. Verdict, despite the fact that Georgia Tech should be improved this year, I still can't see them hanging with this Louisville team. I mean, we look at Louisville, to me, they're much better than before. I think they're underrated, to be honest. I think they're a bit of a sleeper, and I think sharp bettors agree with me. I mean, we saw that win total go from 7 to 8.5, and anytime I think the bookmakers price a team wrong, I think there's value there. I'm going to bet it, and I bet Louisville -7, -120.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like it is a good pick. And, I was blanking on the quarterback. It's Jack Plummer, who, of course, played for Brom there at Purdue, then went out for a year out to Cal. So somebody else that's very experienced in this offense, that's not going to be an adjustment for him. For Georgia Tech, you mentioned Haynes King. Another guy to keep an eye on, too, as well, is Zach Pyron. I think will still very much factor into the quarterback position in terms of, maybe it's a series here or there, or we'll see exactly how Brent Key, plays this thing out, because I know that all throughout fall camp, at least when I was still in Atlanta, they were still talking very highly about Zach Pyron. On the defensive side, a name to keep an eye out for in the secondary, Kenyatta Watson, who was a transfer in from University of Texas a couple of years ago. He is somebody else that they have high hopes for this season. And in terms of Georgia Tech itself, I mean, Matt, let me go ahead and just give you, and this isn't necessarily anything for the players out there, for the bettors out there, but to show you how bad things got at Georgia Tech under Jeff Collins in the last 3 years, I had seen where they had lost 10,000 season tickets over that 3-year time. They had a Georgia Tech fan base that said, I'm not devoting my Saturdays to this. As a buddy of mine said, I'll clean up the language a little bit. Nobody wants to watch crappy football. And even if you love your Yellow Jackets, you don't want to be there for that. Brent Key, to what you pointed out to as well, the win at Pitt, the win at UNC, really there was a feeling of stability in the program that I don't think they had. I mean, this was a program that was thought of the last few years of being, okay, great. You've got the Waffle House Cups. You've got all of that. You're unprepared on Saturdays. And I mean, and we even had the TikTok too of former quarterback Jordan Yates saying that, what was it? I can't remember if it was Jalen Carter or Jordan Davis when he had run into him on the field, said, "You guys are so unprepared." It doesn't seem like that's the case right now there at Tech. You get some key assistant coaches back as well in the fold. So while it might not be where they want it to be right now, I still think that probably Brent Key can get that thing going in the direction it needs to be, where it should be a program that's no worse than 8-4 in a season. When you factor in the recruiting that they have there in the Atlanta area, and also too the tradition that they have in that program, I think that it is something that you could look at and say, all right, show us somewhere. But I just don't think I'm with you on this. I just don't think that Friday night is going to be the place. Louisville, at least at some shops, 7.5-point favorite in this one. The over under 49 and a hook for this game on Friday night. So that'll be a lot of fun. So let's just go through a quick recap here and stop me if I get some of them wrong, Matt. You like in Nebraska, in Minnesota, you like the under of this game where I have it at 43 and a hook. You like that one. You like the first half under in the Florida and Utah game at 23. And then you like Louisville giving the points on Friday night against Georgia Tech at 7.5.
So yeah, I took under 44 in the Nebraska game. We went under 23 first half in the Florida game, and last game in Louisville, we laid 7 with the favorite in Louisville.
All right. Well, there we go. So those are the games. And like I said, we will have in Thursday's episode, we're going to have UNC South Carolina as well as Ohio State, Indiana, Florida State, LSU there in Orlando, the game of the weekend. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Don't sleep on the Monday night game, though, too, as well, that we'll get into on Thursday. That is Clemson and Duke. Riley Leonard, the quarterback there at Duke. A lot of people wondering, could he be the ACC player of the year? It's funny, before we get into the futures here for just a second, I mean, Matt, people look at the top tier, Power 5 conferences right now. And of course, the SEC with Georgia doing what they've done the last few years, and a lot of people being huge believers in LSU and Alabama this year. Maybe even you could throw Tennessee in there as well, saying how strong the conference is going to be. The Big Ten as well. I think the Big Ten is probably a little bit more front-loaded with Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State in there. But we talked about the Pac-12 earlier. Pac-12 After Dark, the final incarnation of it, it's going to be exciting to watch this year. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then the ACC as well, where a lot of people, I think, are looking at it and saying, well, this is pretty much a two-horse race in Clemson and Florida State. We just talked about Louisville right there, and we've seen what Pat Narduzzi's been able to do at Pitt. If UNC can get a defense and they've got the quarterback in Drake May, I don't know if they're going to have Tez Walker, who, of course, the transfer that was blocked by the NCAA. I know that they're still very much in the appeals process with that. But, I mean, all across the board, it seems like this could be a pretty fun football season to watch.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be fun. Like I said previously, I'm high on Louisville. I think they're a big sleeper. I think they have, they can obviously you got big guys over there, right? You talked about, but Louisville, I think they have a shot to surprise people. I think people are underrating this team. I really do.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun Friday night to be able to watch, to see the beginning of the Jeff Brom era there at Louisville. All right, the futures time on the show, again, as we wrap up episode 1 of Dan Mathews and the Animals. And I went with some Heisman picks here, and I have already made these picks myself. And I went quarterbacks. So, Matt, just to kind of give you my thought process every single season, is I like to do a 3-player pick for the Heisman. It's not a parlay. It's 3 straight picks. I did do the Joe Burrow year, and I picked Burrow along with that year putting the same amount of money on Tua Tagovailoa and also on Jake Fromm. And it was funny. Our good buddy and mutual buddy, shout out to John Kincaid. He was like, "Oh, you just wasted your money." I said, "John, it's a dime. I think I'll be fine if it doesn't come to fruition. It's a play. You get the odds, you go with the play." And I think that there is some really good value this year in the Heisman running. So I went with a dime on Quinn Ewers at plus 1,000, and I will give really just the 3 players right now. Then I'll give my reasoning for it, because I think my reasoning, at least, we'll see how much of a square I really am when it comes to playing. But my reasoning is pretty solid. I got him at plus 1,000. I got Carson Beck at plus 2,000. And then I went Jaden Daniels, who is right behind Caleb Williams as being the second favorite for the Heisman this year at LSU at plus 900. So I look at it this way, Matt. It's a quarterback award. And unless you absolutely just outperform the quarterback, more often than not, most Heisman voters, let's just call it what it is. Shout out to Josh Pate of Late Kick, a college football podcast, does a really good job covering the game. The casuals. There's a lot of casuals that cover this game. Let's just be honest here. So they're going to say, oh, the numbers look good. All right, I didn't see very much of them. But you know what? Good team. They're in the college football playoff. I'm going to go with them. That seriously is how a lot of people vote for this award. And in this case right here, LSU is going to have a dynamite running group. I'm starting first with the last player that I put out there, Jaden Daniels. They're going to have a dominant wide receiver group. Mason Taylor back at tight end. Improved run game and a strong offensive line. This is a team that's going to be very much in the running. I think that probably Daniels will need to have some performances, kind of like what we saw from Joe Burrow in 2019, where you have that huge game on the road at Texas. You have that huge performance in Tuscaloosa against Alabama. And then it's far and away, you're saying, all right, he locked it up in the SEC championship game with that acrobatic play that he made. Let's go to Carson Beck, Georgia. They're going to have some attrition at running back. Branson Robinson being out for the year with that torn Achilles, that is going to hurt. But Mike Bobo is back as the offensive coordinator. Now, one thing we know about Mike Bobo during his time at Georgia, they put up points, they put up yards. And another thing, too, they used a tight end. And good news for Carson Beck, he's got a really good one in Brock Bowers. Some people wondering if maybe he could crash the quarterback party for the Heisman Trophy. But you get strong additions of Ra Thomas from Mississippi State. You also get Dominic Lovett, a Mizzou transfer, coming in. And then that's also to build on the group that you've got with Ladd McConkey, with Dylan Bell, with also Arian Smith, who has been often injured, but he showed you in that Ohio State game last year that he can absolutely stretch the field for you. And Carson Beck could have a massive season. Now, this is the one that I think makes the most sense of those three, and that is Quinn Ewers, because it gets back to the casual element of all of this. If Texas is anywhere near being in contention for the college football playoff, he's going to get a lot of buzz. If they go on the road and a game that we're going to talk about next week and beat Alabama, then he's going to have a lot of people who are going to be having him as their early front runner. He's got Jordan Whittington. He's got Xavier Worthy. He's also got Jatavian Sanders there at the tight end. Running back is a little bit of a question with losing both Roschon Johnson and Bijan Robinson to the NFL. But then you also add A.D. Mitchell, the Georgia transfer, who showed you what he could do during his time in Athens in both national championship games, a crucial catch against Alabama to help them win in 21, and then also to a strong performance against TCU last year in that blowout win. I point again to that Alabama game. If he goes in there and puts up a huge performance in what a lot of people are saying is a revenge game for Texas, and they win that game, the Texas buzz is going to be unreal. And if he has anywhere near a good performance for that, I think probably, Matt, we could be looking at Quinn Ewers as being at least the early front runner for the Heisman.
So, yeah, I'm not against that pick at all. I actually love it. We're on it. And we actually are on Daniels as well. So I think you're in good position. Not only are we on Daniels, but we're on LSU, CFB champs, right, to make the college football playoffs. Lead QB and Daniels, doesn't turn over the ball. Elite running back, top 5 D-line, all returning. Added Aaron Anderson from Alabama to help with the special teams return team. Added edge rusher. Forgive me if I say this name wrong. Ovi Agafu from Texas.
I believe you got it right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mason Smith back from torn ACL. Wingo was best defensive defender last year. Besides probably Harold Perkins, added D-line depth. So, I really do believe they have a shot to win it all at 1,200. I mean, this team, a lot of sharp bettors came early. They bet them on futures in all markets, whether it was to make the college football playoffs, championship, the win total, everything. And I'm with them. And as you said, all the points you made, I couldn't agree more. And I really do love Daniels. I do love Quinn Ewers as well. But yeah, there's a couple futures that I'm on. If you guys want to go bet them, go to the window, bet them right now.
That's it. Hey, straight money. That's what we got for you right here on Dan Mathews and the Animals. He's Matt Maltepes. I'm Dan Mathews. He's the animal. I'm the Dan Mathews part of the show. Episode 1 is in the books. Again, Looking ahead, Thursday, same time episode going to be dropping your direction. We're going to have UNC South Carolina to get you ready for over the weekend. Of course, College Game Day going to be there in Charlotte for that one. Ohio State, Indiana. Questions about the quarterback position for Ohio State. Is it going to be Kyle McCord? Is it going to be Devin Brown? We will find out, I'm sure, on Saturday, as Ryan Day has been pretty close to the vest in terms of not showing too many of his cards in that battle. And then, of course, as well, the LSU Florida State game. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch on Sunday. And then that Monday night, good quarterback battle between Riley Leonard and Cade Klubnik there in Durham for Clemson and Duke. So, it's not, like I said, the huge marquee Saturday that we've had the last few years where we had, in 21, Georgia and Clemson to start off the season. Last year, we had Ohio State in Notre Dame. We had LSU Florida State there in New Orleans. But still a pretty solid weekend. And, look, more than anything, it's football season, and we are here for it. So, Matt, great time in this first episode, sir. Let's catch up again on Thursday.
Let's do it. I'm glad to be back. Football's here, baby. Let's go.
The man said it best. We'll talk to y'all then.